And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Jeff Gothelf. Jeff helps organizations build better products and executives build the cultures that build better products. He's the co-author of the award-winning book Lean UX and the Harvard Business Review press book Sense and Respond. He started off as a software designer. He's now a coach, a consultant, a keynote speaker, and he is a co-founder of a publishing company as well, which is called Sense and Respond Press, which is a publishing house for practical business books for busy execs. So welcome aboard, Jeff.
Thanks so much, Peter. I'm thrilled to be here.
So this is going to be interesting because you're sort of on both sides of the house, right? You're the thought leader as well as publisher. So there's some sort of both sides of the table that you tend to sit on, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually having written a couple of books and signed with a couple of publishers over the last few years, now to be on the other side of it and looking to help promote other thought leaders, to create new thought leaders and to build a platform for them has been, to say the least, educational.
Yeah, so let's. I mean, there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but let's talk about that. So let's talk to first the young naive Jeff who wrote his first book and thought the publisher would do everything, and I'm paraphrasing here, right? To Jeff,
Yeah.
the hard nosed publisher, trying to convince his authors and thought leaders to market their book. So tell me that story if you could.
Absolutely. I was a software designer for a decade, and about 10, at that decade point, there were two key things that really happened simultaneously that made me. It was a turning point for me. One is I turned 35. And when I turned 35, I was terrified. I woke up terrified in the morning of my 35th birthday
But isn't
that
35 like the new 12? Or I haven't checked the algorithm today, but isn't that like barely an adult today?
Today,
Okay.
yes. 10 years ago, less so. And
Okay.
it certainly felt like, certainly with two kids, a wife, a
Okay.
mortgage, a couple of cars, I
Oh,
felt like it. I
oh, that's an
was feeling
adult.
like an
That's
adult.
an adult. Okay, yeah, yeah. Mortgage equal
Yeah,
adulthood. So yeah.
right. And so I've got a couple of kids. I'm married. I got a house. I have a couple of cars. This the standard sort of suburban New York City life. And I'm waking up at 35, and I'm terrified because in 5 years I'm going to be 40, and there are kids coming out of school who are better designers than me,
Sure.
who are faster than me. They know all the new tools and will work for a fifth to a quarter of my salary.
Yeah, that's
And
not
so
good.
in five, no, no, no. And so I was like, in 5 years, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to be 40 years old. I'm going to be overpaid and unemployable. And that simply was just not acceptable to
Wait,
me.
and no
And so
AI paranoia that if that doesn't happen, the machines will just take over and you'll be useless
that was
anyway.
still a little early for
Okay,
that.
all right,
This is about 10 years ago, so the AI thing was still
okay.
mostly
Well, I'll give
movies.
you something to worry
So
about later today. So.
yeah, that's right, that's right. And so 10 years ago, I decided on that day that I would never look for a job again.
Okay,
That work was going to find me. That was the decision that I
I
made
love
because
that.
up until that point, I'd been chasing jobs, looking for work, applying for work, trying to network with headhunters, whatever it was, always making sure that the next thing would be right around the corner. And I
And by
realized
the way,
that.
by
Go ahead.
definition, that's a bad place. Not by definition, but it's not a great place to be because the power is imbalanced. I want, you have,
Right,
right? Please let me show you
right.
how great I am, and you're sort of always on audition, and that's a really high stress, not fun place to be. So I love how you said you're never going to look for. So what did you decided to create something that would generate the demand so they'd come knocking on your door? How did you successfully flip that?
Right. Well, there was no plan at that moment.
Okay.
That was the declaration,
Ah,
right?
okay.
The,
There you go.
the
Okay.
declaration was this has to change.
Okay.
And so look, the short answer is I realized that I had to make myself better known, create a bit of a personal brand, and just really put myself out there more proactively than my resume and my LinkedIn profile were doing at the time.
Well, but let me ask you there. So I would assume you were at least a good, if not a great, software designer, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so
I thought I was.
yeah, so replace software designer for whatever, consultant, lawyer, et cetera, et cetera. We're all at risk of that. We're all being commoditized, and a common differentiator is the deployment of, in a consistent way, of thought leadership to build your brand and differentiate. So it sounds like that was
Right.
really the genesis for this.
Yes. And so I started putting ideas out there, and they really felt like 101 level ideas. The first thing when you start putting ideas out there is like you ask yourself, well, what am I going to write about? What am I going to
Do I
blog
have anything to
or
say?
right, right. And I feel like everything's been said about everything already. Turns out there's an infinite market for 101 level content, first of all. So your perspective on the basics, the entry level mechanics of your job, of your discipline, or whatever it is, there's always a market for that. That's what I discovered right away.
So I want to add a comment on that because I think you're 1,000% right. Because the curse of the expert, or the curse of doing something for a long time in a specific field, is you're always sort of moving to that next level, whatever the newest thing is. But when you think about it sort of as a pyramid, that base of the pyramid in terms of the knowledge in your field is really wide, and lots of people want to know that one-on-one level, and we tend to sort of look our noses down at that and go, oh, that's so
Yeah.
elementary, and who would care about that? But I think just from a market size standpoint,
Yep.
you're 1,000% right. Doesn't discount the need for adding new and innovative and creative thought, but that base of the pyramid, people, I think, from a, I don't know if it's snobbery or whatever it is, look at it and go, oh, that's so whatever, like that's beneath me.
For sure. Look, and your experience and your expertise and your point of view on that foundational knowledge is unique. And so you've got something to say. And so I'm putting these ideas out there, and at the same time, I managed to. I had a critical point in my career as well, not just in the sort of the professional development, but also I'd been working for a decade as a designer, and the work that I was doing was not challenging me anymore. And in fact, it was becoming monotonous, and something had to give at that particular moment. So there was a nexus of activities happening about 10 years ago that really forced me.
But that piece as well. So I just want to make a brief
Yeah,
comment on that. That piece as well. A lot of us find ourselves there, where we've developed the muscles and we're no longer challenged. And then there's a fork in the road there. Like, do I just want to sort of cruise by and coast because it's gotten easy for me, or do I intrinsically need that intellectual stimulation and I'm a lifelong learner and all that sort of stuff? And I think lots of people choose sort of
yeah.
the easy road there. Like, oh, I can sort of coast and do other
Yeah, for
things,
sure.
right?
And look, and again, that's fine, but then you're always in that
Sure.
I want, you have, I'm chasing the next gig type of thing. And I just wasn't willing to risk ending up again overpaid and underemployed basically. And so right at that critical juncture, I got a job in a leadership position, a design leadership position, where I had an opportunity to solve a problem that the software design world was having as a whole. My organization wasn't unique, but we were having the same challenges that every other organization that was doing similar work in other businesses. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work on this issue, and I solved it. And we solved it. That's my team, and I solved it. And this became the fodder for my content. So I began to write about this. I began to speak at meetups about this. I began to submit talks to industry events about this specific topic.
And is it because so it's almost irrelevant today what the topic was, but the fact is you made an assumption that, hey, if I'm struggling with this in my field, in my position at this point in time, by the way, I'm not unique. I'm not that special. There's lots of others that are, that could benefit from my sharing the way that I figured it out. Was that sort of the
Absolutely, because we
hypothesis?
had gone out to the
Good,
market to try to
good.
find solutions for this problem, and all we heard was, "We also have this and don't know how to solve it."
So hence an opportunity.
Exactly. And so and look, and the amazing thing here is that what I didn't know is that book publishers, and in this case it was a tech book publishers because I was working in the tech field, they go to events and they look for the latest topics and the people who are answering questions, who are solving problems in these latest topics, and they offer them book deals. And yeah,
Voila.
yeah, which it simplifies the process greatly, but that's essentially what happened. And so I'm out there speaking, writing, presenting on a topic that is relevant to the entire
Sure.
industry. And all of a sudden, I'm staring at two competing book deals from two different tech publishers to write the Lean UX book, basically, is what it ended up being.
Great, great. Okay, so that process now add to the resume. You're an author. Tell me what you learned from that experience, not from a content perspective, but maybe let's frame it this way. You come into this, you were solicited, you've got a perspective. What did you think? How did you think that was going to play out in terms of your role and the publisher's role, and how did it actually play out?
I thought it was going to be this hand in hand, glorious partnership where we check in daily and we review each other's work, and like they check my work and they give me feedback, and they compliment me and praise me and urge me to go on and bring this home over the finish line.
This sounds like a business romantic comedy, right?
Romance is what I really did. I was like, well, you guys are investing in me to do this. Don't you want to kind of be, right,
Succeed, right?
right, be my partner in this? And the reality was the exact opposite. You sign the contract, they send you a fraction of your very small advance, and basically they say, "See you in 6 months. Here's some templates."
Right, right.
Best of luck.
And by the way, if you would take the fraction of the advance and amortize that over the hours spent, they basically offered you a sub minimum wage
Oh, for
job
sure, for sure.
that you gladly
Yeah,
took.
yeah, I willingly took it. Yeah,
Right, right.
and so it was brutal, and so what I learned was, I learned the hard way that this was going to be all me, doing the
Yep.
work and writing. I learned how to write. That was look,
Said the author,
well, I mean,
right?
I mean, look, there's a significant difference between a 750 word blog post and 30 to 40,000 word book. I mean, it's a
Yeah, no, of course.
radically different concept. I mean, stringing together 3 paragraphs in a cohesive narrative is one thing. Stringing together 8 chapters, that's a different story.
Right. So you have to. So one is long form is clearly a different animal than short form, but let's move to for a moment. You know, then you want people to actually read the book. So now it becomes a marketing initiative. I would
Yeah.
assume that Jeff, the software guy, probably was not a fluent book marketer when this book came out.
No.
There was probably not a core capability that you had,
Yeah.
and I would assume that you probably assumed the publisher that publishes lots and lots of books every year had that capability. How did that actually play out?
Yeah. So the good news, bad news here is that it took me 2 years to bring this book home, to bring it over the finish line.
From a writing standpoint.
Just, yeah, from the day I signed the contract
Okay.
to the day I turned in a manuscript that the publisher accepted, it turned out it was 2 years, 2 calendar years.
Wow. Okay.
I'd written the manuscript 4 times
Wow.
in that time frame, and mercifully each time was better than the last because they kept giving me another shot. But so that was the bad news. The good part of that is that for 2 years I was talking about my book. I was talking about the Lean UX book. It was
Okay.
it was in my signature. I had a little mailing list. Sign up, I'll let you know when it comes out. Whenever I was on stage, I would be talking about this material and say, and look for my book coming out in the spring of 2013. And so and again, I'm solving a problem that the entire industry has at this point. And so people paid attention, so that when the book came out, there was 2 years of demand that I had not single-handedly, but certainly
But
driven the
largely,
demand
yeah.
for. Yeah.
Got it. So then at some point the light bulb goes off that says you want to be on the other side of the table, that there's an opportunity for you to be a publisher and fix some of this, right? Is that sort of the thinking behind, like, how do you go from being an author to a publisher? Because that's not a journey most people take.
The material that I teach and that I write about is how I live my life, both my professional and my personal life. And the short of it is that any new idea or any big change or venture is inherently risky. And so you reduce the risk by experimenting with smaller versions of it and then using evidence to justify further investment.
Okay.
And
Logical.
so I published 2 books. I published one with O'Reilly. I published one with Harvard Business Press,
Okay.
which was
Both incredibly reputable.
uh, yeah, and very different and yet strangely similar experiences. And
Sure.
then I realized that I'm putting in, like you said, sub minimum wage hours to publish books that, look, I'm not retiring on the royalties here. Certainly the consulting revenue that's driven by the books is significant. But and so I said, well, if I'm going to publish these books, there's got to be a way for me to capture more of the revenue given the amount of effort that I put into these projects. And so I started to explore self-publishing. And I had a friend who she does. Her name is Christina Whitkey. She does self-publishing for herself. She's done tremendously well, and so she kind of laid out the process for me, handed over all her contacts to me, and said, "Look, here are all the people I use to design the books and edit the books and whatever." And she basically taught me how to do it. And then I ran an experiment, and I said, "Can I self-publish?" And that experiment was I wrote a 6,000 word version of a popular blog post of mine.
Okay. So you expanded on something that you knew had already resonated with your target market, right? So you took a
Exactly.
right. Okay, good.
Exactly. So the blog post was the first experiment, and then I wrote 6,000 words, which is, in the grand scheme of things, almost nothing as when it comes to a book.
Well, it's a equivalent of a chapter or two, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I self-published it.
Okay,
And so I taught myself how to publish a book.
I love that. Okay.
And then the book sold, to my pleasant surprise. Um,
Whoa, whoa! People are giving me money for this.
Yes,
Whoa.
and not only that, like, and I get to keep a significantly higher percentage. I mean, look, that book, the first book is called Lean versus Agile versus Design Thinking. That book sells for half of what my other books sell for, and I make double
And
on
it's
each one of
a
them.
tenth of the content, right? So it's not,
Right, exactly.
books are not like a turkey, pound of turkey where you're you're charging per pound. If it's
Right.
relevant, if you have an audience, and if it's targeted, they might pay. I just want to touch on the economics there because a lot of people sort of fast forward through this, right? So the typical publishing deal with a big house is, let's just forget advances because they've sort of gone the way of the dinosaur for most part today. But even without an advance, next step is a lot of the big publishers are requiring that the authors do a guarantee. So it's the worst of both worlds, where all right, we're not going to give you any money, and you have to guarantee us, buying 3,000 books at wholesale. So the risk is now 1,000% on the author, right? Where they've just basically funded the first print run, and then miracles happen and hard work and effort and energy and all that sort of stuff. The book sells, you get like 20 cents on the dollar. You get a buck or two a book. Like this is not good math, right? In your model, you might have to front some of the cash to self-publish, right? But you're keeping, depending on the platform you're on, 60, 70, 80 cents on the dollar.
That's right.
Yeah. So just from a business model standpoint, no brainer.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And frankly, again, the level of marketing and support that you can expect from a traditional publishing house is significantly less than you think it is or should be. There's always a little, right? You're on their website, you're in their book fairs, you're in their catalogs, maybe they connect you with a few interesting people to do some promotion here and there, but ultimately it's on you. And so if it's on you, you might as well reap 70, 80 cents on every dollar.
Exactly. And I think there's a mistake that people make to think, the publisher's going to do all this stuff. So you're making it clear that's not the case. But B, there is a taint or something. If I don't have a Random House, a Wiley, an HBR, whatever imprint, Harvard Business Press imprint on the spine of my book, I must be lesser than, right? It must be that this was no good. And that's just, I mean, that may have been true 15 years ago. It's just not the case.
Right.
The other point I want to make is you had done a great job being out there of already developing followers and a platform and people that were paying attention to what you had to say, and you were giving them lots and lots and lots of stuff for free for a long period of time to do that. So on the rare occasion where you asked them to pay for something like this short form book, those that wanted to did, and it probably wasn't a lot of effort from a marketing perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And exactly. And again, the price point was lower. The
sure.
and look, and the hypothesis here was that people will actually buy and read, not just buy, but read the shorter book. And when the book sold and the feedback was positive, that was inspiration. That was the next bit of evidence to me to say, you know what, maybe there's another business here. There's an opportunity here in short, focused business books for busy executives. And that's when the idea for Sense and Respond Press came about, and that's when we decided to invest in this a bit more, because the initial experiment worked and continues to work. That book, we reissued it under the brand, the Sense and Respond Press brand, but it continues to sell and do well. And now we have 8 books in market, and and we've created a platform for first time authors, for entrepreneurs, for thought leaders to start to create that those thought leadership pieces that hopefully will help them the way they've helped us.
So yeah, what's the typical? Is 6,000 words the sort of the magic range? 5 to 10,000? What's the
10 to 12, 10 to 12,000 is
10 to 12? Okay,
yeah.
interesting. And they're targeted and they're specific. It's interesting. One of the things I hear a lot from folks is, I just read so and so's book. It was 220 pages, 60,000 words, whatever the sort of standard is. And yeah, it could have been an article. It could have been a TED talk. It could have been, And there's a lot of that. And then, by the way, there are plenty of books that you need all that space. But when you think about, we live in a world today where time is the scarcest resource. And when I invest in a book, I don't really care about the $20 or $30, but it's like I'm going to put whatever it takes, 4, 6, 8 hours to read that and concentrate and focus. What am I getting out of that in terms of the learning and such? And that's really the exchange or the trade off people are making in their minds when it comes to a book. And you alluded to it earlier. Selling a book is one thing. Most books, even that are sold, aren't read past the first chapter, which is a whole different issue.
Yep. Listen, we did user research, we did customer research. We went to these busy executives and we talked to them. What do you read? How do you read? Realistically, how much do you consume of every book? And when we came back after getting the feedback that we needed in designing our books, when we put these books into the hands of these same people, the reaction is identical every single time. And the reaction is, "Oh, I might just actually read this," right? Right.
Right.
And that's, and to us, that's the win, right? That's the win that we're looking for.
So I love that you experimented with business models, you experimented with the modality in terms of finding the right length and size, and then obviously the market that it's targeted for the busy exec. So it's bigger than an executive book summary, smaller than a book, not quite a blog post. So there's this interesting sort of unique size here. So as we start to sort of wind down here, what couple of questions would you throw at folks to be asking themselves before they either committed to either a publisher or to self-publish? What are the things they should be thinking about?
I think that there's look, I think realistically, the publisher can really help you. A specific publisher can really help you gain credibility with a
Sure.
specific audience. So I'll give you our example. So the first book and I have a co-author. I keep saying ours. Josh Seiden is my co-author. The first book was Lean UX. Lean UX was a tech book written for the tech industry on a tech publisher, O'Reilly.
Right.
When we went to write the next book, Sense and Respond, we wanted to write a business book. And so we were concerned that we didn't have the credibility as two software designers to write a business book that anybody would pay attention to. And so we explicitly went after the Harvard Business Review presses of the world because we wanted that credibility to say, Harvard says we are qualified to write a business book, and so you should read it. And so I think that if you're looking to build credibility in a specific with a target audience in a specific world, and you don't have that, then maybe a publisher that has that credibility is a good way to go for your first book in that sector.
Sure.
However, if you have an audience, if you have a following, if you've got credibility in your domain, in your industry, and you want to write for that domain in that industry, I would seriously consider self-publishing. The platforms exist, the ease, the service providers exist, and getting a book done it's ultimately your call when you think it's good enough, which is a good thing.
Well, I think if we stop calling it self-publishing and realize that any book that is published, you are self-marketing, right?
That's true.
I think it would change the thinking. So this has been great. I really appreciate you sharing your journey and what you've learned. And I love that you've taken it from sort of the conceptual to the applied and then eaten your own dog food a little bit and become a publisher. So you are on both sides of the house and you found a need in the market and went after it. So thanks for sharing, Jeff.
My pleasure, Peter. Thanks so much for letting me tell my story.
My pleasure. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.